Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And in today's episode, we're going to try and figure out what in the world went on with Alec Bohm in 2024, who maybe had the highest of highs on this Phillies team and the lowest of lows. We'll break it down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You might know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space here in Philadelphia. I've been on air over 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio doing Philadelphia sports talk for 5 years now. I've been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for 3 years, and this is my third season as the host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure, if you would, that you're rating and reviewing if you're consuming this in podcast form, leaving those reviews. That really helps us out. And if you're watching or if you're going to go check out the video component of the show on YouTube, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. It gets you notifications when new episodes are posted. It's also the number one way to help us out here on Locked On Phillies. It helps me out significantly. So would love if you guys were able to do that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So go ahead and check out our friends there. Now, we've done everyone else in the infield. That means it's time for the third baseman to be evaluated for his 2024 season. And Alec Bohm had an incredibly interesting 2024 year. Like I said in the intro, he had some incredible highs and some incredible lows, and I don't truly know where that leaves him. And I think the only way that we're going to be able to find that out is talking through it together. So let's do that, and let's start with some of the numbers and the highlights from Alec Bohm's season. Now, first and foremost, the guy was an all-star starter at third base for the National League this year. It's his first all-star nod to be a starter at third base, which you look around the National League and Nolan Arenado plays third base in the National League. Austin Riley plays third base in the National League. There are some big-time names that play the hot corner in the National League, and yet Alec Bohm was the guy. Now, he was deserving, I believe. I don't think it was one of those, oh, well, Phillies fans just got out and voted because the team is amazing or was amazing at that point in the season and everything like that. No, I think he was pretty fully deserving of that nod. He was unbelievable to start the season. A great year for Alec Bohm. At the start of the year, pre-All-Star break, there was no denying this dude was having an elite level year. So that's the biggest accomplishment of the season for Alec Bohm, is that all-star starter nod at third base. So right there, you might say, wow, well, you had a guy that was a solid third baseman, young option that you hope develop into something like, could he be an all-star one day? Maybe. And then he's an all-star starter. And yet it still might not have been a successful enough season for Alec Bohm. How in the world does that work, right? It's tough, but that's how weird of a season it was for Alec Bohm. And I'm not saying it was not a successful season, but I think there are some people that could argue that based on what happened in the postseason, which matters significantly. So here are some numbers from Alec Bohm's 2024 season. He batted .280. That's a strong number. How he got there might not have always felt like the most linear path. There were points where he seems like he couldn't get out, and there were points where he seemed like he couldn't get on base. But ultimately, over 162 games, he batted .280. He had 15 home runs, which he was in the home run derby and won in the first round and hit a bunch of tanks. And it was just like, wow, this dude actually does have some wiry pop from that big frame that he's got there. And he still is yet to show it in games. So it's just like, I can't expect him to ever be more than a 20 home run guy. He was a 20 home run guy in 2023, 15 this year, 13, 2022. Like, I can't expect that power to come. I can't. At this point, I don't know. We've seen him at the major league level for 5 years, including the shortened 2020 season, but still 5 years. And he's a good baseball player, a very, very good baseball player, above average at his position, above average compared to players in general. But that lack of power is a little bit annoying. I will concede that. I don't think it's that big of a deal. So there it is. Now, RBIs wise, had 97 for the second straight year. On the nose, the same number of RBIs he had last year. If you're going to be a near 100 RBI guy with only hitting 15 home runs, that means that you are pretty darn good driving in runners on base. Like, that's incredible to be a near 100 RBI guy with only 15 bombs. Now, part of the way he does that is doubles. Doubles were Alec Bohm's bread and butter this year. He had 44 on the year. That's an insane amount, I believe, atop the ball club. That was really, really well done by him, finding that gap-to-gap power, not out of the ballpark, but being able to find, and he's not that fast of a guy, so he's, trust me, got to hit the gaps in order to get down there to second base. Alec Bohm was good in that sense of creating that, and that's where the RBIs came from. The strikeout numbers, he had 86, which is down, down 8 from 2023. The number of plate appearances are nearly the same. He had, So he had 611 and 6. So he was down 5 plate appearances. So in 5 less plate appearances, he had 8 less strikeouts. That's pretty darn good. And the walks, he only had 2 less than 2023. So you look at the overall numbers from the regular season, you might say, wow, well, Alec Bohm consistently 2 strong years at the plate. Maybe not in the way that you would think based on his frame or the position he plays, because you want your third baseman to have pop. But I don't know. Those numbers say, hey, really good year from Alec Bohm. And the problem is a lot of those compilation numbers were garnered in the first half of the season, right? He had an elite start to the season. He looked incredible. And then he kind of tailed off later on in the year. But some people do that. And baseball is a stat compilation type of sport. And when you look at everything, like, that's why you go by average, is the biggest number when it comes to batting. Like, okay, I can kind of understand how people would argue that Alec Bohm had a really good year. On top of that, defensively, the guy was solid. Solid. He's not going to win 8 Gold Gloves. He's just not. He's not that guy. But is he a league average defender at third base? I might even argue he's better than league average. Now this is not like how we had the conversation, Brandon Parks getting the nod for a Gold Glove nominee. It's not like I said, oh, he's clearly above league average. No, it's not the same thing. What I'm saying is there are 30 third basemen in baseball that play starting, or maybe 32 if you mix in some platoon guys or whatever. Is Alec Bohm in the top 15 or 16 defensively? Possibly. He's, you know what, when I put it that way, he's probably league average. But still, that's a spot that we didn't think he was ever going to get to when it came to his defensive prowess. He was absolutely terrible over there at third base to start his career, and he's gotten significantly better. That's credit to him as a young player to go ahead and figure all of that out. And when I say young player, I mean still a young player. He's just 28 years of age. He has more great years left, I believe, playing professional baseball. Like, I don't think Alec Bohm is young, obviously, at 28, but I don't think he's at a point. He should be just coming into his prime now. So you should have a couple of guys who are like entering their prime as hitters. Bryson Stott should be right on the verge of doing that. Alec Bohm should be doing that. You're going to have a couple options for guys to up their production. And maybe Alec Bohm's one of them, but he already had such a darn good year. The problem is you say all of this and it's like the highest of highs sound like the whole season. Well, the lowest of lows were the streaks to end the season, one of which was just this terrible, like lack of RBI streak and lack of getting on base. And he was miserable down the stretch. He got cold as ice. And then in the postseason, it carried over. And Alec Bohm, the biggest thing with him that was a drawback was not on the field. It was the emotions in the dugout at points this past year where he just seemed distraught. Like, dude, you're an all-star starter. You're very good. You're on the team that finished with the second best record in all of baseball. What are you doing? Losing your mind in the dugout about that. I know you're not playing well, but you got to have some mental fortitude, my guy. You got to, I don't want to say toughen up because it's more nuanced than that. I don't think he's not a tough guy. And he did have like the hand injury late in the season. Maybe that affected stuff. Maybe that was part of the reason that he was a non-factor in the postseason and down the stretch a little bit. But you got to get to a point where you can't be bringing the mood down in the dugout. He was benched in the second game of the Philadelphia Phillies postseason run in the NLDS. The Phillies played 4 postseason games. Alec Bohm only played 3 as an all-star starter because his emotions were getting the better of him, is what it sounded like from stuff that I've heard from around the team. So, that's not a great reason to have to pull you out of a postseason series that you end up losing to the New York Mets. So what do you even evaluate with Alec Bohm? I mean, the numbers, I can't say he had a below-average season. It was too good from those acclaim points that I already went through. It was too good of a year in the ways that he made the All-Star team, made starter, was in the home run derby, had nearly 100 RBIs again, averaged 280, 44 doubles. I got to give him I'm going to give him a B+. And someone might say, you're crazy for not giving this guy something in the A's. The mentality and the postseason issues are just too much for me to put him up there. He was an absolute liability when it mattered most. And I can't give someone like that an A evaluation on their season. Now, compared to his peers around third base, I would say that's also where I'd put Alec Bohm. I'd give him a B+ season. I think that's right around, no, I'll give him an A- against his peers. I'll give him a B+ based on what the Philadelphia Phillies needed to do, just because part of me is in between those two grades on his score in general. So that's how we evaluate Alec Bohm's 2024 season. And we're going to talk more about that postseason struggle coming up, because I want to know if there's really a chance that the Phillies would move on from Alec Bohm this offseason. Some people have brought it up. He's not in great graces with the fan base right now. We're going to have that discussion as we continue today's episode of Locked On Phillies. First, though, let's talk about Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. They got over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's so easy. You just pick more or less on at least 2, that's just 2, simple, 2 players and their stats for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. For example, like tonight, the Flyers play. If you picked over points for the Michkov, Konechny, Couturier line, and you said, well, I want 2 of those 3 guys to have over whatever their points number is, 0.5. Let's just say it's 25. So if 2 of those guys get a point, bang, you're in the winning. How easy does that sound? That line against Minnesota over the weekend had 12 points between the 3 of them. There's great stuff. See how easy it is on Prize Picks? I'm not smart, and I can get it done. And I can find a way to win money on Prize Picks. And it takes me 60 seconds to set the lineup. You just go down and select the players and the stats, and it's super easy. You don't play against other players as well. You don't have to beat the next guy in the condo over from you that's putting in his thoughts as well. No, what you do is you just have to play the numbers. It's super simple, and Prize Picks can pay you out a good amount of money. It's your best way to get action on sports that you care about. So go ahead and download the app today, and make sure you use promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So this is an interesting conversation to me, because I don't really follow how people get here. But we'll have the conversation anyway, because I've heard it from enough Philadelphia Phillies fans. Is there really a chance that the Philadelphia Phillies move on from Alec Bohm this offseason? Is that within the realm of possibility? My mind immediately screams no. No shot. See? I'm allergic to that line of thinking even. That is just something that doesn't seem to make sense. And here's why, right? I know people were not happy with Alec Bohm in the postseason. I was not either. The mentality that he showed, or lack thereof, was frankly embarrassing at points. And that has nothing to do with the baseball player. That has everything to do with the athlete. I'm not saying Alec Bohm's a bad person or anything. I'm not saying, oh, this dude is terrible. He's the reason the Philadelphia Phillies aren't in the postseason. No, I'm not going that far, but he did not help his team enough. And part of that was because of his own mentality. And part of that led to him being benched in the second game of the NLDS this year. And part of that is unacceptable. And that's something that he's going to have to get over. But let me ask you something. If you had a guy that at 28 years of age, a still arbitration eligible player who's probably going to make around $8 million this coming season, right? Maybe a little bit more than that. Somewhere between 8 and 10, I would say, is where Alec Bohm is going to come in. Would you really say, as a World Series contending team, with a window that's not going to be open forever, it's still open right now, but not going to be open forever, would you move on from that guy? All-star starter, nearly 100 RBIs, batted 280, 44 doubles. You've heard all the stats, created all this opportunity. Strikeout numbers aren't crazy. Can field it a little bit over there at third base. If you're moving on from that player, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. I firmly believe that. Think about it. There have been teams that have talked themselves into fixing the worst swings they've ever seen, and terrible defenders, and guys that have no power, and guys that can't hit for average, guys that strike out too much, all of these issues. And they see it on the field and they say, you know what? I think he's got this little hitch here. We're going to fix that in the swing and see if we can save him. Oh, I think he's got this little issue with the way he fields fundamentally. We fix that. This guy could be a really good fielder. There have been such tough problems that coaches and organizations have fixed in baseball. And you're telling me that a guy that is really darn good on the field, that has come through more often than not for the Philadelphia Phillies in the regular season, but has been a major disappointment in the postseason, that's going to be a guy that you just cut bait and move on from? For who? Who are you going to bring in that's going to give you the production that Alec Bohm gives you in the regular season, right? And the argument would be, well, Connor, I don't care about the regular season. I want somebody who gives me that production in the postseason. So, okay, guess what? You still got to get there. You still have to get to the postseason. The postseason is not guaranteed. The Atlanta Braves barely made it in and got quickly bounced. The Arizona Diamondbacks, who went to the World Series last year, did not make the postseason. The Texas Rangers, who won the World Series last year, did not make the postseason. It is really easy to go from in to out. And the way that you do that is by making moves like this, by saying, Alec Bohm, we don't like your attitude, so we're going to take a lesser third baseman over a arbitration-eligible all-star starter, and we're going to try and make that work just because the guy threw a hissy fit? No, that's not the way that presidents of baseball operations think. So no, I do not think there's a chance that the Philadelphia Phillies move on from Alec Bohm this offseason. That would seem way too much of an overreaction to me, to the situation. Now, are there things he needs to work on? Absolutely. Are there questions about the long-term view on Alec Bohm, which we're going to talk about coming up in our final segment? 100%. I'm not saying, well, this guy's a lock Hall of Famer for the rest of his career. How could you ever question Alec Bohm? No, I get it. I just don't understand how we went from where he was this season, even with the cold streaks he went through down near the end of the year, to get this guy off my baseball team. I don't want to see him again. Well, I do get that. And that's the fan reaction, right? And I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling that way. He should have annoyed the heck out of you over the past 2 months. But it doesn't lead to he's going to get traded. He's going to get cut. Like, that stuff sounds silly to me. Not the emotion, right? I was as annoyed at Alec Bohm too. And that's like kind of how you voice your emotion. Dude, I say it about great players all the time. Get this dude off my baseball or basketball or football or hockey team. This guy stinks. Even though I know deep down in 2 days, I'm going to be like, he doesn't stink. And he had a bad game. And I was valid for being annoyed at the time, but I took it too far. Like, that's the emotion of being a fan. But when you take the emotion out of it, as the time goes by, as we get further and further away from the Phillies losing to the Mets in the NLDS, and we get deeper into the offseason, you're going to feel silly, I think, forever saying the Philadelphia Phillies should move on from Alec Bohm. Here's the bottom line. Making that move does not make this baseball team better, right? You cannot justify to me that there is an available player for the same amount of money or a similar price point that makes you a better baseball team than Alec Bohm. You can't do it, right? And if that player does exist, they're not going to be available. So you've got Alec Bohm that is good enough at third base. And while the long-term view might be a little bit murky right now, next year's view is pretty simple. Alec Bohm is going to be the starting third baseman of the Philadelphia Phillies. I firmly believe that. You can clip this. If I'm wrong, I'll wear it. But I feel pretty darn confident that there's no way the Philadelphia Phillies move Alec Bohm. There's one type of scenario where they would. And it's one of those absolute pipe dream trade scenarios where something perfect comes down the line that's like, why are you even offering us this? Or why is this player even available? And those don't, like, you can't go into an offseason hoping for that, right? So that's short of anything insane happening. In reality, it doesn't seem likely at all that Alec Bohm is not a Philadelphia Philly next year. Get ready to see 28 a couple more times down the third base line as this era of Philadelphia Phillies baseball continues. Coming up next, though, we're going to talk about how much longer that conversation holds water, because it may not be much longer. We'll discuss coming up as we wrap up Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel, because you can get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and they get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Now, you might want to get in on FanDuel now, because they're going to be out of money soon if they keep putting the lines that they do on the Birds. Listen, the football team's rolling here in Philly. I've made some great money on them the last couple of weeks because FanDuel has great odds and they're very easy to use to bet. But you better get on this promo quick, because I might take all their money if the Birds keep playing the way that they are. Bottom line is, just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, here's where this conversation gets interesting, because I did just tell you, there's no way Alec Bohm gets moved this offseason. So shouldn't he be in the long-term plans? I told you Bryson Stott was. And when I told you Bryson Stott was, well, I also said of the daycare, Bryson Stott is probably the most likely one. And the reason I brought up, if you remember, is because there's no heir apparent at second base if Bryson Stott doesn't work out. You could flip Bryson Stott and Trey Turner, but that's not removing Bryson Stott. That's just changing his position. There is an heir apparent at third base. And this is where it gets really interesting. Aiden Miller has been incredible for the Philadelphia Phillies down in the minor leagues. Now, Miller is not ready to come up this next year. He's not. He's got to get to a point. He's probably got another season before he becomes that could he crack into the majors type of conversation. Now, not because of lack of production. He's been insane in the minor leagues. The guy looks like a bona fide, like, all-star caliber player. And I say that, and then I just think, well, Alec Bohm is an all-star caliber player right now. So that's why you don't move on from Alec Bohm this season. But Bohm is arbitration eligible for this year and next year, and he's a free agent in 2027 is he's scheduled. And I see this name down here under agents on his baseball reference page. The Boris Corporation. Yeah. You know what that reads? He's getting paid. Scott Boras is going to go out and say, this guy got 97 RBIs 2 years in a row. He's going to have 2 more years of probably pretty productive baseball. And then if he makes another all-star team and he's a 2-time all-star at the age of 30 and you can go ahead and get him his one big payday, he's going to be expensive. And the Phillies, well, they have a lot of expensive assets already. They're going to be signed in 2027. Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez is expensive. Harper, Turner. There are going to be a lot of guys that you've committed money to for that 2027 season. Can you give a big contract out to Alec Bohm? Especially when you have a young player waiting in the wings like Aiden Miller, who's going to cost you nothing because he's going to be pre-arbitration eligible. He's going to be under team control forever. It would make sense to assume that Alec Bohm has 2 more years with the Philadelphia Phillies. He's got 2025 and he's got 2026. And in 2026, if things are not going the way that the Phillies would hope with Alec Bohm, you could see Aiden Miller come up and split time, or maybe even play a little bit of time at first base or play a little bit of time at second base. I would expect Aiden Miller to be a third baseman at the major league level, but you never know. They might just get him some time in the infield to get his feet wet. Kind of the Cody Clemens role, if you will, but maybe they don't want to do that because they don't want to mess with the kid's confidence. Whatever the case, I would expect Aiden Miller to debut in 2026. And I would expect that to also be Alec Bohm's last season in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform. Unless something crazy happens and Alec Bohm becomes this like 25 home run, 110 RBI guy that's an all-star perennially at third base and maybe even has one of those years where it's like, ooh, does he have an outside chance at MVP if he bats like 300? Now, those feels like stretches, but like that's kind of what you'd have to put together to have the Phillies want to pay you the amount of money that he's going to garner for his numbers that he's putting up right now, especially with a cheaper in-house option that may even be better. Like Aiden Miller could be the truth, guys. This guy is an unbelievable prospect, and we know prospects don't always work out the way that they're supposed to, but this feels too perfect, right? Right about the time where you're having to pay Alec Bohm is the time Aiden Miller's scheduled to come up. Aiden Miller looks really good. Alec Bohm has some question marks. It would be the perfect, easy transition for the Philadelphia Phillies organization if that's the way they wanted to go about it. So can you give me a reason that they wouldn't want to do it that way? I can't think of one right now. And there are a lot of things that can change between now and then. Let's say, for example, knock on wood, one of these guys gets hurt next year. We'll have to see what like injuries or something that can always change. If it's Aiden Miller, it can change his stunt his growth as a baseball player, not physically, but like when you look at how he progresses through the minor leagues. Could one of these guys have just like a significantly down year? They're not guaranteed to continue this production. Sure, maybe Aiden Miller doesn't have a great year next year. Maybe Alec Bohm doesn't have a great year next year. Like this is where things stand right now. But I'm calling my shot here on this one. This seems to be like I'm reading the defense really, really well on this one. If I was a offensive player in another sport, I'd know exactly what's going to happen. This guy's going to go here. This guy's going to go there. It all opens up for me. I feel like Matt Damon looking at the chalkboard in Good Will Hunting. Mark Wahlberg was not in Good Will Hunting. See, I'm not good at math. I'm only okay at movies. You get what I'm saying. It makes too much sense for it to not be probably the Philadelphia Phillies plan right now. But there's a lot of time between now and then where stuff can change, which is why you don't move on from Alec Bohm now. And that's why anyone who's talking about Aiden Miller, sorry, I had a fly in my face, Aiden Miller coming up next year and you can move on from Alec Bohm. Like, slow your roll, folks. Let's not get hasty with it. It's going to be an option in the future. The long-term view of Alec Bohm should be this: a player that has a chance to do some really great things in this city for a short period of time before his back is against the wall when it comes to his time playing for the Phillies. And he may not mind that. Remember, he was very frustrated this past season in the postseason. We know the I blanking hate this place issues, and he apologized for it immediately. He handled that situation amazingly well, which you will always have to respect, and which made him, in a lot of ways, a fan favorite for that time. But now we're kind of rolling back to the other side a little bit, where it's, okay, well, this guy is kind of mopey. And how many times can he apologize for it? And how many times can we go into the postseason and one of your better hitters in the regular season is completely a no-show? So Alec Bohm's at a turning point in his career here in Philadelphia. It doesn't mean like he stinks, and it doesn't mean he's not going to get paid somewhere. It doesn't mean his major league career is not going to still be a strong one. Like if he goes to another team in 2027, gets a huge payday, he can be productive, be a very good player. Kind of, you know what, similar to Rhys Hoskins. Rhys Hoskins feels like a very similar player to Alec Bohm and the way the fan base feels about the player. And then where did it change for Rhys Hoskins? The bat spike. After that, it was, oh, well, this guy is absolutely amazing. He is a legend forever in this city. He is a guy that, even though they didn't win the World Series, will always have one of the resounding moments of a magical postseason run that led to a World Series appearance and a National League pennant. And now it's like, okay, everybody loves Rhys. You could see everyone loving Alec Bohm if he has one of those moments because he's that talented of a baseball player. But he has the drawbacks. For Rhys, it was he can't field the baseball to save his life. For Alec Bohm, it's postseason production hasn't been there. So it's going to be a major question over the next couple of years. It's going to be very interesting to watch. I do believe we'll get the chance to watch it play out because I don't think Bohm is going anywhere. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow, we're going to start with the outfield, and we're going to go to another very interesting evaluation out in left field. Brandon Marsh. What do you make of him and his 2024 season? It was a major disappointment to a lot of guys. Now, he's my guy. I'm going to try and be as unbiased as possible, but I'm interested to see what his upside could be in 2025. And I'm interested in the way Dave Dombrowski described him in his end of the year press conference. So that'll be tomorrow's evaluation. A lot of great stuff there. Once again, I want to let you know we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube. All that stuff really helps us out. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.